Welcome, everybody, to a Good Story podcast. Today, we're going to be covering military campaigns. We'll start off with the Voyage of the Damned, which was a Russian fleet sailing all the way across the globe just to get wrecked. Along the way, they started a war with British fishing boats, South African fishing boats, and whales. No, not the country, the actual animal, whales. Next, we'll cover the Bay of Pigs invasion and that train wreck. And the most important man who ever lived. He prevented everybody from dying from a nuclear war, and yet nobody knows this man's name. Lastly, we'll cover Wrath of God, which was an Israeli revenge plot that spanned decades and was highly controversial as multiple innocent people died, including a waiter who happened to be living in a tiny town in Sweden, who unfortunately seemed to look like the mastermind of a terrorist plot. All right, without further ado, let's jump into it.
We're going to talk about, kind of two things. We're going to talk about the Battle of Tsushima, but more importantly, the lead up to it, and also more importantly, the main character, whose name is beautifully Zinovy Petrikov Rostovinsky. I'm going to try and let's just call him Razi for this, because I'm not going to be able to pronounce that the whole time. So, good old Razi is the commander of the Russian Navy during the Russo-Japanese War, which takes place, begins in 1904, goes throughout 1906. So at the beginning of this war, the Japanese Navy basically traps the eastern, basically the
direction.
Yes, the direction, where Japan is located next to Russia, that side. The fleet on that
teaching geography here. Japan is east of Russia.
We're a History Channel, Bender. We don't do geography here.
We don't do geography here.
I'm blanking on directions.
Anyway, that's kind of basic though. That's like
Japan's east of Russia.
It's not like you're trying to tell me how to get to the closest Walmart or something.
I know. It's been a long week. Anyway, the Eastern Fleet gets bottled up by the Japanese pretty early on. So the Western Fleet is attempting to travel 18,000 nautical miles to reach and basically rescue the Eastern Fleet. This is the longest coal-powered naval voyage in recorded history, because they go all the way from the western part of Russia, all the way down around Africa, up past Madagascar, up all the way to between Korea and Japan. So on their way, though, good old Razi is not really too enthused with his fleet. They're all
Joe, would you be happy with your commander after being on a boat that's a tiny ass boat for months and months at a time, shitty food, it's Russia, not well equipped, come on.
No, but what's funny about that is all of these sailors are brand new. These are raw recruits. They have never really sailed before. None of them have really ever been on a long voyage before. And Rostovinsky knows this. He is aware of this, and so he's constantly drilling his troops on the way, but they're incredibly paranoid at sea. They almost start an international incident. They do start an international incident with Britain because they haven't even, left they haven't even gotten to Spain yet, and they find a British shipping boat, and they freak out because they think it's a Japanese U-boat, and they try to shoot it, and they kill three British fishermen, which eventually leads to an international incident, and Britain actually pulls their boats, their navy up, and goes, "Are we going to war? What's going on here?"
What the hell were British fishermen doing near the Sea of Japan?
No. They haven't even left the English Channel yet. Like
Oh
they're
shit!
sailing. Yeah, no, they're
They're
sailing.
already causing incidents. You guys haven't even got out of the neighborhood yet.
No,
Come
and
on.
that's
Like,
what makes it ridiculous because
I will
like
turn this boat around.
like they're like, oh, it's a Japanese U-boat. Like, no, it's a British fishing boat. You hadn't even left. You've barely started your voyage.
We're not to Japan yet. We've been here for days. What are you talking about, Joe?
They take it, and this happens constantly throughout the voyage. There's one particular ship that keeps becoming a nuisance, and it's the one that caused the that incident. And then eventually they fire on a whale because the same ship fires on a whale because they think it's a Japanese U-boat. They fire on some other fishermen in down in South Africa. It's just a constant thing this whole way. And eventually, Rostovinsky had enough of it, and he just drops them off, and he's like, "Go!" Like the officers in charge of the ship, he's just like, "You're gone." He just leaves them, and they keep going. And then eventually, they do end up making it all the way around and up into the Japanese Sea with. Right between Korea and Japan, and the Admiral Togo for the Japanese military is waiting for them, and he completely destroys them. Which it's actually, this battle is notable. The Battle of Tsushima is notable for being the first uses of like radar in naval battle. And so the Japanese actually use like wireless communication, and they have good what's it called? They have good like reconnaissance vessels out, and so they completely wipe the floor with the Russian fleet. The Russian sailors lose 5,000 men. Rostovinsky is captured, and he's captured, and then they at the end, when the Russia eventually it eventually leads to like a peace treaty between Russia and Japan, basically.
Well,
And
this is what helped like start like the Red Revolution.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
Russia's,
yeah,
like,
no, it's one of the most,
massive
like,
losses to
important
Japan.
battles in history. But what's notable about Rostovinsky in this is at the end of this, after he's like back in Russia and he's being court-martialed for this disaster, the admiral who actually surrendered, because Rostovinsky got hit like with shrapnel in the head pretty early on in the battle, and so he was basically unconscious for most of it. And so the admiral that actually surrendered tried to be like, no, I actually surrendered. I should be the one that gets punished for this. And Rostovinsky didn't. Was like, no, he stood up for that guy, and he was for his whole crew, and was like, no, it's my fault. I'm the one. And so that eventually led to all the charges being dropped against them, and none of them actually faced any charges for this, which is probably a good thing because they really didn't deserve anything. But
I don't know. They kind of almost started a war with Britain, killed a few
that's true. Okay,
whales.
those guys they did deserve that. But no, it's a story of an incredible like naval voyage. It's really impressive actually that they were able to make it all the way. People that had never really been sailors before, all the way around 18,000 nautical miles. And I'm not a sailor. I don't know what that means in terms of distance really, but I'm imagining it's not a short distance. So
you look like a sailor, Joe, though, right now.
Like a sailor? Oh.
You look like you'd be a scally. They put an eye patch on you, put a little navy hat on you.
Yeah. I don't know. You got those earrings going on. You looking more
Bender's
like
the pirate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a pirate. I'm definitely not. Don't look like a sailor.
But yeah, no. So that's the story of the Battle of Tsushima. It's an incredibly silly journey that ended in a lot of actual tragedy and human disaster. So there you go.
Didn't Japan? Wasn't that the one where for like the first time in like international norms had been violated by Japan, where they attacked without actually declaring war on Russia? Or is that a different battle? It's the same war, but I don't know if it's that like.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
it's
not
not-
sure it's the same one, but like,
Not the same battle, no.
but like
Okay.
think about it this way, like this, like so like Russia wins against Japan, so like so no, I'm hypothetical. Like I know they lose, but hypothetically say they win. Think about it this way: Red Revolution never happens because like the monarchy in Russia like keeps power because they keep winning wars and keep like bringing in wealth and prosperity for their people. No revolution, no Soviet Union,
Yeah.
no
but-
industrialization of Russia to that extent. Like maybe Nazis take Russia. Like it.
Yeah.
Maybe. Well, also, if they would have dealt a blow to Japan, no Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
True.
So, and also Japan used that war again. I think it was a different battle. I actually think it was different because if I remember correctly, Japan literally just started the war with Russia without declaring war and just like destroyed their entire Eastern Navy. So that's why they had to send those guys that Joe was talking about over there.
Because they immediately like destroyed that Eastern Navy and like bottled them up in like this port, and so they're coming to rescue these guys that are stuck there, and then try to reinforce that port.
So Japan used that blueprint for Pearl Harbor. They were like, "We're not declaring war. We're just surprised, motherfuckers. We're gonna destroy all your ships in this place." And so
it worked.
Interesting. Yeah, it did work.
No Pearl Harbor, no U.S. involvement because it was very like war was very unpopular until that happened. So
we would have got involved eventually.
Eventually, but think about it this way: like they would have had more success in Russia. They would have had longer to take and hold Europe. Maybe the Blitz lasted a little bit longer before the United States starts stepping in. Like,
oh no, for sure, it definitely changes things because they would have longer to fortify. They would have longer to basically dig in and make the
right.
Yeah.
But say United States, say we still are able to win. No Soviet Union post-war, like the United States has no real big enemy after the war. We're still the only economy standing. Like,
so you're saying the men in the high castle is a possibility in one timeline.
In one timeline where Russia beats Japan in a few extra naval battles.
yeah, exactly.
Japan doesn't become the powerhouse it is. So that means there would be no man in the high castle, right? Because they took over Western U.S. in that scenario.
Well, it wouldn't be exactly the same, but it'd be
no.
So Germany just gets all of America? What the fuck?
I think we still win long term, but yeah.
I was gonna say it's really hard to invade mainland America. Like that's almost.
Yeah, we might even be harder than Russia in some like it's so many different climates.
Giant fucking mountains, huge climates, large like diverse population in very large cities. There's very rural. You have to take
a lot of guns,
so much land,
tons of guns.
We're just so big too. Like, I mean,
yeah, we're really like imagine trying to plan for like urban warfare of New York and then like the middle of nowhere of like Kansas, but then the cold of Minnesota in the winter, but then the heat of like Arizona.
Yeah.
And I feel like that'd be just a logistical nightmare for a military invading. Not saying it couldn't happen. We don't want to jinx it. Knock on wood that China. We do love you, China, but I'd prefer to.
Man, they'll just take us all down economically.
Yeah, I was gonna say there's no need to conquer countries anymore. You just control them.
No, yeah, it's generational warfare. You sabotage them with their communications, like pretty much just the internet and their infrastructure, and then you take them over economically, and that's it.
Yeah, and that's it. And they're your bitch now.
Yeah.
And we would love nothing more than that, but put that off for a couple more decades.
We will shill.
Y'all remember that remake of Red Dawn where it was
with Josh from Drake and Josh plays the main character.
Yeah, with North Korea.
With Chris Hemsworth. I forget Chris Hemsworth's in that movie.
Oh no. That was bad. But it was
bad.
Okay. Who's next? Who can top the Russo-Japanese War?
Oh, I can top it, Joe.
Okay, fair.
Joe's like, I give up. You win.
Okay. Well, my famous battle is a little bit different. In fact, the most important.
Wait, I thought we were doing operations.
Operations, battle, whatever. It's an operation.
All right, fair enough.
Battle.
I considered doing Operation Barbarossa originally, but this one's better because the most important person who ever lived is in this battle. Bar none, the most important person who has ever lived.
Helen Keller?
Fun fact, Helen Keller spoke at my great grandmother's like high school graduation.
I would say, like, Joe, like, how was she alive when you were alive?
Yeah, like
Great
fun
grandmother.
fact.
Great grandmother. My great grandmother had a fascinating life. She went to high school with Carroll Shelby, the guy that invented the Mustang.
The Carroll Shelby, really?
Carroll Shelby. No, I'm not kidding. At their high school reunions, he would show up in all of his Mustangs and just drive them around.
Jeez, his the Super Snake, like one of his like cars, just sold for like $5.5 million.
Holy shit!
Yeah,
Yeah.
that guy lived a cool life too. He's a pilot for in the war for a while. Anyway, going back, most important person who ever lived. Fun fact, was around for the Bay of Pigs. Which, if you don't know, I'll do a quick setup here. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing, but Castro seizes power in Cuba, nationalizing American industry, seizing a bunch of American assets, pisses off the mafia because they were doing this big like thing with like fruit, apparently. Go figure.
Yeah.
So essentially, it pissed off Eisenhower. Eisenhower is like, okay, well, obviously a commie, I want him removed. So he talks to the CIA. It's like, hey, all those fun little coups you've been throwing in South America, why don't you throw one for Cuba? CIA is like, sure, we can try. So what they did is essentially they started trying to plan. Like obviously this is like way back. Like this isn't too far before the actual Bay of Pigs, but they're trying to plan, at least consider it as a possibility. Now, a few things happen between this and the Bay of Pigs. The first being a boat explodes in the harbor of Havana, carrying a bunch of guns for Cuba, because Cuba at this time was fighting a bunch of rebels. Cuba blames the United States, so Castro gets kind of pissed off, thinks like, well, they're trying to undermine me, so I need some powerful friends. So decided to get in bed with the Russians. So they start talking to the Russians, and guess what? Russians are like, well, we're happy to help you. Cuba, you got a lot of oil over there. We'd love to partake in some of that if you don't mind. So Cuba's like, yeah, absolutely. So seize some oil reserves. Russians help them out with it. Obviously, this escalates things a little bit. So the United States is a little bit more looking for like an option to remove Castro, and it kind of comes to a boiling point in late 1960, where Castro actually goes to New York and meets with Khrushchev and Malcolm X. Go figure. Which can you imagine how cool it would be to listen on that meeting?
Yeah, that'd be really the random assortment of people. Yeah, that's pretty
Castro,
cool.
Khrushchev, and Malcolm X. That's got to be apparently they met in some little local bar or something like that. Still exists in New York.
Yeah, it was in Harlem. You said it's Harlem, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they met in Harlem. He stated he wanted to know that because Castro's smart. I mean, he knew about Black people's struggle and the civil rights movement. So he's like, oh, this will look good. And Black people in Harlem loved Castro for it, that he stayed in a Black hotel. So he played it well. And was able to use that as his meeting with Khrushchev is obviously as some leverage. And Eisenhower eventually learns about it and says, okay, well, obviously Cuba's siding the Soviets. We don't like having the Soviets so close to us, because Cuba's it's right fucking there. 90 miles, I think, from Florida.
Yeah, like nothing. So Eisenhower's like, well, we're going to invade Cuba, but we're going to keep it on the DL. So what we're going to do.
I would just imagine Eisenhower saying that to the hey, keep it on the DL, boys. We overthrown a country.
We're going to invade Cuba.
So anyway, the way they decided to do this, they decided well, who has a lot of Cubans? Miami. So they go down to Florida, and they recruit 1,500 former Cubans, and then they train them with the CIA through the early 1960. So the rest of 1960 essentially trained these former Cubans, in the United States to go fight and overthrow Castro. So United States, obviously, 1960 was an election year. Cuba was a hot button issue. Kennedy wins. Spoiler alert. Anyway, So Kennedy sees the plan, stamp of approval, and then so the U.S. Army goes to Nicaragua, where they get a bunch of foreign planes and things. They obviously don't want to trace back to them, so they get a bunch of foreign military equipment, where they to do this invasion. I'll abbreviate it a little bit because it's kind of two invasions. In 1960 or on April 16th, there's actually a small diversionary invasion of northern Cuba. That happened first to try to draw attention away from the area it actually went to, which in fact wasn't initially the Bay of Pigs. They were going to go actually further down south to invade. There's actually a better shore they were going to go to because they're all the rebels were in the mountains over there. So they're going to go in there, try to invade. If they got pushed back, they could just fall back into the mountains, the rebels, and try to guerrilla warfare. Obviously, that didn't happen. The Cuban Air Force actually wiped them out pretty quick. Yeah, which caused a real big international incident.
Train wreck.
Yeah, absolute train wreck. Yeah.
Logistics of that. Let's do the air support is just it's not possible with air support. I don't know what without air support. Yeah.
Well, obviously, America couldn't hide its intervention. The Russians.
What are you talking about? This plane is from England. It's not us, guys. We swear to God. Keep it on the DL. It was us, guys. Whispering to the other military guy. It was us. Don't tell them.
I know we threw a bunch of coups in South America, but this one wasn't us.
One is not on us.
Not us.
Not us.
Which brings me to the most important person who has ever lived, which is Vasily Alexandrov, another Russian naval officer.
Fair?
Yes. This one, though, was born into a peasant family in a very small town near Moscow. Went to a naval school. Actually, his first actual piece of combat was actually the Japan-Soviet War. The Japan-Russian War, yeah. But unlike Joe's whole hodgepodge of characters, this guy actually still was in the Navy, became a deputy officer, and eventually after that became a deputy commander. He was actually in charge of the small Russian submarine fleet that was it was near Cuba, and so international waters near Cuba that are super deep down. United States obviously launching their invasion, they start dropping depth charges on the submarines. The submarine goes even deeper. And obviously they're too deep for radio communication. So what happens is, after being down there for a few days, the captain of the submarine decides, you know what? War's been declared. We're sitting down here. Let's go ahead and launch a nuclear torpedo. Yep. So, spoiler alert, that didn't happen.
No.
So the entire world was not destroyed. Which obviously, if you would launch a torpedo, United States would start launching nukes, and Russia would start launching nukes, and there'd be no more anything.
Nothing would have. This would not be happening right now.
This would not be happening. Nothing would be happening right now.
Yeah.
But since he was so the captain technically had say over the ship, so he technically had say to launch it. But since this guy was the fleet commander, the captain technically needed his approval. Although the captain could have overruled him, he was able to talk him out of it. They were like,
hey, can we not destroy the world? I don't know. I kind of want to destroy it.
The thing is, it wasn't just that, though. It was the captain and the other two officers were convinced that the war had already started to launch it. So it was 3-1 to launch the fucking nuke. And he was able to convince all three of these guys not to do it. And so what they did is, after they waited a few days, they went back to the surface, and then they contacted Moscow, and we still have a world.
We still have a world. Yeah.
Hey, should we launch the nuke, guys? What the fuck are you talking They're just.
We've been down here for 3 days. What do you mean?
Oh my God. You imagine, Moscow's response, what the hell? You guys were gonna launch a nuke?
They lost.
Thought it was failed. A war going on. Well, we didn't know. Oh.
Yeah. So that's why he is the most important person who's ever lived.
He is definitely up there. I will give him that.
It's harder. It's harder to justify anybody else.
That's true.
All right. Well, mine is not quite. Has nothing to do with Russia for the most part. We're very, very maybe one little incident assassination has to do with Russia. But
They're
other than
always
that,
involved somehow.
no overthrowing governments with Bay of Pigs, none of that.
Just one killing of Archduke Ferdinand.
This what was with that face? This has probably the coolest name, I think, for an operation.
Oh, yeah?
It's Operation Wrath of God.
Okay, that is pretty good. I'll give it that.
This operation was in response to the Munich massacre at the Olympics in 1972. What happened was the Black September terrorist group. It's a Palestinian terrorist group. They're an offshoot of like a splinter cell of the Palestinian Liberation Organization. As you can probably guess, based on even today's politics, they weren't too fond of Israelis and Jews. So they sneak into the Olympic Village, kidnap 11 Israeli Olympic athletes, hold them hostage. They demand, release like I think it was like over 250 Palestinian prisoners in Israel, or will kill them. And of course, they like to show they're serious. They shoot one guy and he like bleeds out in front of all of them and dies. So then they're trying to escape with the hostages, and Germany completely botches like the rescue operation, and all the Israeli athletes get killed. Every single one's dead. All of the terrorists get killed, with the exception of 3, I believe, get captured. So, as you can imagine, since the Olympics is such an international event, especially back then, it's all over the news, and the Israeli people are like, what the fuck? Like, something needs to happen. We need to like fuck some motherfuckers up. So
this is the reason that Germany created a counterterrorism force. Like, that's the whole reason they had one, is because of that event.
Yeah, they were not prepared for that, needless to say. So there is so much pressure on the prime minister to do something. And what happens is Israel bombs Syria and Lebanon, where there's like a Palestinian bases of operation there. But they're like, that's not good enough, because that's sort of like, that's like war in the Middle East. That's not really that related to it, even though it's under the Palestinian like liberation banner. It's not quite the same. So what they do is the prime minister, what's her name, Golda Meir, she makes Committee X, which is like a top secret committee in the government in Israel with only like a few top officials, and they basically decide who lives and who dies. And
sounds like fun.
Yeah. Cool. So the reason why she was a little bit sketched out by it at first, even though she had all this public pressure and all her officials, like intelligence officials, were saying, yeah, we gotta do something about this. She signed off on the operation, but she was like, I don't know, this could be bad, for obvious reasons. And but then what happened was the terrorists like kidnapped a plane, German, I believe it was a German, it had to be German, a West German plane, held that hostage and said, if you don't release the 3 surviving Black September terrorists, we're gonna kill people and stuff, blah, blah, blah. So they actually get set free. So then that's only a couple months after the massacre. So then Israel's like, oh, hell no. Like, the prime minister's like, all right, no doubts now. we're going to kill everybody. And they kill everybody. So Golda Meir is just like, screw it, whatever.
There's that story about the international assassination, like the Israel does. Like, they start just killing a bunch.
Oh, they start killing everybody.
Yeah.
Then
I heard about this.
They start making a list of. So they know the assailants, right? But those are just like the dogs that were sent to do the deed. They want to know who is the head operating people around the world in Europe. So they find out there's this one guy who I'll talk about later, because they don't get him till later. He's known as the Red Prince. I believe his name, I'm trying to remember his name is, but anyway, for right now, I'll just he's really hard to catch, because he's really good at hiding. But so they get all these former PLO members that come to Israel, and they're like, hey, we want a cushy life for us and our families. So, hey, we'll give you information if you give us a cushy life. So they start building, Mossad starts building, a list of people. And the problem was, turns out international assassination is frowned upon in the world, and it's illegal under international law. So Israel says, Goldamir's like, no one can know. Like similar to Jared's Bay of Pigs, like where they buy weapons from other countries, like nobody can know this was us. We have to be able to be
guys,
I don't know.
serial. I'm super serial. Keep it on the DL.
Guys,
Keep it on the
wag your finger at them. Don't you do that. Don't you get caught. So I had to write this down because there's too many killings. I have to kind of summarize it. But the first one was, oh my gosh, Wail Zwainter. And anyway, point is, doesn't really matter. No one's gonna remember this guy. He was in Palestine, but he was like at the Libyan embassy in Rome, in Italy. They go there and they just, watch him for a long time. One of their goals was I don't know, semi-admirable, I guess. It was they tried not to kill like even if it was family members or friends, they were like just the target. So he goes to his Australian girlfriend's house, and apparently he was known as like a peaceful, loving guy by his friends. So some people claim that he had nothing to do with like the murders, but Mossad believed that he was like one of the head of Black September in Italy, like as the head guy. So he's getting into an elevator and like the entrance, and they just pull out guns and shoot him a bunch, and calmly just walk away and get in a car and leave.
effective.
And yeah, so that was the first one. That was the first shot, or shots fired. And so the next target they go is they get a little bit more creative. They're like, all right, shooting people is pretty easy, but we want people to be scared of us. They literally said that. They were like, the goal wasn't even really revenge. It was like, you know what? We just want everyone to look over their shoulder for the rest of their life. So they're like, all right, there's this guy, Mahmoud Hams Harry. I don't care. He's dead. He's dead. So they're in France. He's in France. And like, oh, he's the head of the France one. So they lure him away by pretending to be a journalist for a newspaper. So while he's gone, do they go in there? Do they assassinate him like by luring him away? No. They go into his apartment, break in, start taking pictures of the walls and stuff and looking, and they find this desk and they take a sample of it and they take pictures of it to like perfectly do the dimensions they measure. They leave, they lock the door again, everything. What do? They send all these, measurements and whatever back to Israel, have an expert bomb maker make the top part of this table exactly with the exact same material, so it's exactly the same, but it has a bomb in it now. They ship it back to
That's creative, Bender.
Ship it back to France.
That's amazing.
Break into his apartment again, screw off the table head, like take apart, put the new table head onto it with the phone on top of it, and then they call him and they're like, hey, is this the guy? And they go, he's like, yeah. And so they're like, blow it up. And so they blow it up. Doesn't die. The guy eventually dies after a couple of weeks from complications, but he gives like a whole interview about what happened to the investigators, about, whatever. No one can figure it out. But yeah, so he actually doesn't die initially, but he eventually dies. So they're successful. Yay. That was like December 8th of that year. So they're just going crazy. So that's 1972. So this all happens in the span of, like whatever, like that year, not even a full year. Then they're like, okay, January 1973, Hussein al-Bazir is, they think, oh, he's the head of Black September in Cyprus. So they plan to bomb under his bed and kill him. Now, they also think he was related to had relations with the KGB, and Israel wasn't a big fan of that, apparently, for some reason. And so there's your Russia connection right there. But other than that, they just put a bomb under his bed and killed him. April 6, 1973, Basil al-Kubazi, I don't know. He's like the arms logistics at he's a for the Black September movement. These are just like I don't want to say normal guys because obviously they're not normal, but
They're
like
just normal arms dealers. You're friendly neighborhood arms dealers.
yeah, well, he's also like a professor at the American University.
You
in
can do
Beirut.
both.
You can do both. That is true because he did do both, and then he goes to Paris, and they're like, "All right, we're done with the bombs. We're done being creative." They shoot him 12 times in the like near the heart.
They could have been more creative than that.
Yeah, I know. Like I was like, "Come on, guys, you had this cool table thing, and now you're going back to shooting people. Come on." So then, this is where it gets good. There's a second operation that's a sub of Wrath of God. It's called Operation Spring of Youth, where they know there's 3 guys for the PLO in these like heavily guarded like complex like apartment buildings, these big buildings. So they're like, we can't really assassinate them. So Mossad gathers information. They call in the commandos, and they dress up as women, and shit just goes completely wrong. They complete their objective. They kill all 3 guys, but they kill 2 police officers. This is the first time innocents were involved. Killed 2 police officers, 1 Italian citizen, and one of the guy's wives. And then they actually went to another building too and blew up like their base of operations. And 2 of the Israeli commandos died. So the first time Israeli commandos died, or Mossad, anybody on the Israeli side had died in these operations, and first time innocents had died. So it was like a fucking train. They did complete their objective, but it like everything went wrong. I'm not even covering all the detail because this is another operation, but yeah. So they're just like storming apartment complexes. So they're like, that's too much work. So then they bomb a guy in Athens, bomb a guy in Rome, or bomb 2 people in Rome with some car bombs. And then so then they screw up all that. So then the last thing is they all right. So the last thing is they put a bomb under a guy's car seat with like nuts and bolts, and when he sits on it, it explodes and kills him.
That's a little more creative.
That's a little bit more creative. It's pressurized. So here's where it gets just like, okay, so here's the Red Prince. So this is the guy Mossad believes was the very head of like planning the Munich killing massacre. Ali Hassan something with an S. So he's been able to avoid them for the longest time, right? And he's been passing out false information where they are. So they're trying to find him. They're trying to find him. He's their number 1 guy from the beginning, but all these years they can't find him. And then they get a tip. The tip is go to Norway. He's in a small like town in Norway. And
is that not the best place to hide? Some small ass town in Norway?
Oh, but turns out, Jared, he was not hiding there. And everything goes
dun.
Everything goes wrong. Ali Hassan Salameh, nicknamed the Red Prince. They think, this guy, he's in the small town Norway. So they go, and it's called the Lillehammer Affair. And I don't know if it's I've never seen the Netflix show. It got canceled. It was one of their first original series about it, and it was called Lillehammer. So I don't know if it's related to this in any way because I've never seen the show. But yeah, so they're in Lillehammer on July 21st, 1973. And yeah, they just shoot a random Moroccan waiter and kill him. Yeah, he just was a dude. He has no connection to anything. The informant like mistakes him, like he mixes them up. So then like 6 of the Mossad agents get caught, and they actually get arrested, and some of them escape back to Israel. And 5 of them are convicted and imprisoned. Eventually they were released a couple years later. But I mean, now everybody knows. That's the problem, because before they were so good at killing all these people, even if you thought it was Israel, you weren't sure, right? There was no definitive proof. So
Yeah,
now,
they're terrorists. Like they obviously have like natural enemies, like lots of them.
so now everyone's like, what the fuck is going on here, Israel? So Israel's like, oh yeah, we don't know what's going on. We don't know what you're talking about. Those guys
Rogue
aren't.
agents, all of them.
I mean, like it's literally like everyone knows, but they like to this day Israel denies it, I believe. Like so. Anyway, they're trying to find this guy still. So then 1974 in January, they go to Switzerland and they're like, oh, he's gonna meet the PLO leaders in a church, and so they go to this church and they just shoot the two. They send two Mossad agents and they just kill all three guys, none of which were this guy. I do believe they were PLO guys, but I don't think they had anything to do with the Munich massacre. They were just leaders in the organization.
They're still kind of terrorists, so it's kind of like
Yeah, well, but again, they did it in Switzerland, so it's all these. They're just killing people all around, Europe. So they had to abort the mission because they couldn't find him. So then their commander Michael Harari goes, all right, we're done, guys, like abort the kill Salome operation. This has been going haywire. But the Mossad team's like, nah, and they just ignore him. Like, you know what, we're gonna go
too much fun getting creative.
Yeah, and so they go find intelligence that he's in a house in Tarifa, Spain. And so three of them go to the house, and there's an Arab security guard who like has an AK-47, and he like, is like, hey, who the hell are you guys? And points at them. So they shoot him dead. And they're like, oh man, that wasn't the best idea. So they abort the mission to attack the house, and they just go to a safe house and eventually leave. But what happens is, because of all these killings and stuff, people start connecting the dots, and the captured Mossad agents gave up like safe houses, and the revealed other agents, like government started investigating, like, how did you do your operations? How did you kill these people? That's why we have so much information. So yeah, they eventually trace him to the Red Prince to Beirut in 1978. So this is like obviously this is 6 years after the massacre. And what they do is they load up a Volkswagen packed with plastic explosives, and they just like park it. And when the guy with 4 bodyguards gets in, and this is actually him this time, gets into a car and drives by it, they detonate the car with I think it was a radio device. Yeah. And it kills everybody. It's successful. It kills all 4 bodyguards. It kills the guy. So after 5 really bad attempts at killing this guy, which led to just like random people getting killed, they finally assassinated Salome. Problem is, they also killed 4 innocent bystanders. One of them was like a British student who was like studying there, a German nun, and they also injured like 18 people. So that whole like don't kill innocents is like, that's off the table now. They're just like, fuck it, whatever. And yeah, they just leave, and that's pretty much the it of Wrath of God. I mean, there's other assassinations. There's responses by Black September. One of them was a plan. The Israeli prime minister at the time that started this all was going to go meet the Pope. And those silly little priests in the Vatican, there was a priest who was pro-Palestine. I have no idea why, but was pro-Palestine, and leaked that they were meeting the Pope and this prime minister because it was top secret. And so then they were like, all right, we're just going to shoot it with missiles. But then Mossad found out the plan right before it happened. And so she wasn't assassinated. So there you go. But a lot of assassinations, nobody's really sure how many there were because like it's top secret. And there was a lot of infighting in the PLO at the time. So they were killing each other too. They were assassinating each other too. So they just know that they would send like letter bomb, like Israel would send letter bombs to PLO people, but PLO people would send letter bombs to, let's say, if you're working in an embassy in Copenhagen, they would send like letter bombs to them. So yeah, it was just,
basically, you can understand why these guys still hate each other to this day. And yeah, it's still widely criticized by the international community, especially by Europe, because all these operations took place in Europe, except for like the Beirut ones and but the complicated assassinations took place there. And again, it's obvious now that it's Israel because of the captured Mossad agents. So so there's a lot of people that a lot of assassinations, a lot of death, but coolest name ever was an operation that took like over 20 years and was very creative in their killings. So that's the Wrath of God operation.
Very cool.
And as wrathful it was.
It was very wrathful. It was very successful.
Oh, it sounds like it. Also, the reasons why a priest might be sympathetic to Palestinians could fill a whole video in itself, but we won't go into that tonight.
Okay. I wasn't sure why. I just know that's what it was reported as, that like a priest was like, "Hey guys," I'm like, "Oh, you silly priests. You just
I just recommend the movie Paradise Now. Great movie. If I've never seen that.
I've never seen that. I don't even know what that is. Paradise.
They're not paying us, so I'm not gonna.
Yeah, they're not
mention them.
sponsoring this video.
It basically gives you the Palestinian perspective of that conflict. But anyway.
Is that the one where they're talking about the walls and stuff?
No, I think
That was a documentary I saw where they're just like, "Hey, they built these big walls around our Palestinian town," and they're just basically like, "You can't leave your town without our permission." I don't know, whatever. It was a long time ago. I saw that.
Yeah, that is it. At the very end, like they end up joining like a terrorist group.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, you're thinking of the right one.
Okay. So I have seen it.
Yeah.
Fun.
All right, that's it. That's all we got. That's our 3 military campaigns. Hopefully you guys were entertained. Hopefully you learned something. Probably learned that humans are stupid. The stupidity of Russian soldiers. The stupidity of Israeli spies confusing a waiter for a terrorist. And the stupidity of people who wanted to start a nuclear war for no reason. I think what we've learned is humans are just overall pretty dumb, but they lead to very entertaining stories. All right, till next time.